Birds of Prey issue 2, Chuck Dixon writing, Greg Land on the art. Obviously, not really the second issue in this run. This is actually more like the 9th issue in this run, but that's okay. So this is the follow-up to the cliffhanger where Jason Bard, ex-fiancé of Barbara and Dinah try to process that information. I actually think this issue did a really good job, or I guess what I'm trying to say is there was that scene in the last issue, in issue 1, that teased was it Hellhound or whatever his name is, the one that looks like a cat, but it's actually something hound.
Yeah.
We see him like chasing these people down, and it was like really out of context, and like there was nothing to really say what it was or what was going on. I think by the end of this issue, when you realize, okay, what this was, why he was chasing them, where he was chasing them, I was like, oh, that actually all completely makes sense. All of a sudden.
Yeah, it feels like a reasonable follow-up on that and contextualizes it nicely.
Yeah, it was a good tease in hindsight, I think. I think it played kind of almost weird on its own, which I guess maybe you could argue that's not a good tease because it felt kind of weird, but honestly, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, well, that actually feels fine. It feels totally normal.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a balancing act that I would say it probably doesn't get quite right, because you want to have it feel satisfying in this issue when it comes together, but you also don't want it to feel so jarringly out of place in the previous issue that you're just questioning what's happening. So I don't think it's quite nailing it, but at least it's sticking the landing.
That said, though, I do think that the reveal in this would not work as well if there wasn't something like that in the first issue to kind of make us go, oh, that's what that was. Like, because on its own, this would be such an extremely weird idea. This idea that Jimmy Pajamas is kidnapping rich people and forcing them to work as slaves, and all the like the rich stuff, all the watches and stuff that he had in the safe are all just like stuff that they own to prove to their family members that he's got them. Same with the body parts, the old send a finger in the mail tactic, as it were.
Yep.
So Dinah jumps in. She's in the fight because the guard snuck up behind her. Bard is still playing his character, and there's actually a genuine thing here where Babs on the other end and the computer thinks that, hey, he's a scumbag now, this is terrible, I need to make Dinah a cover story, but no one's really buying it. She's tied up, she's got her in an interrogation room, and Jason comes in, he's like, I want to talk to you first, and he's being all awful. He's like, oh, I'm going to make her talk, and yada yada yada, and
Babs is smashing up a keyboard.
Yeah, you can literally, it's basically that old meme video of the German kid getting angry that he lost whatever game he was playing and smashing the keyboard. Remember that now?
I do, yeah.
It's basically at that moment she's like, damn you, Jason Bard. But
she's literally got tears at this moment.
Yeah, and but then he leans in and next to Dinah's ear and says, I'm going to help you out of here, I'll undo your hands, and then I'm going to take out this guard. So it's like, no,
it's her ankles, or does he feel her hands and she does her own ankles?
Yeah, because he frees her hands and he says, you do your ankles, the guard is mine.
Yeah. I can just picture her kicking a lot, and I think that's why, for some reason in my head, it was he freed her ankles first.
No. So
no, he doesn't. You're right. I think it's just her kicking a lot is in my head.
So yeah, so there's a fun bit of banter here where Babs is kind of in her ear saying, don't tell him too much, don't tell him that you know me, keep this stuff secret. But she kind of like lets it. She calls him Jason Bard, and he's like, how do you know my name? And so that's my little secret. And she's like, keep it that way, Dinah. Keep it that way.
Yeah.
This fun shenanigans part of this doesn't last too long though, because they're trying to get away, but Jimmy Pajamas just got too many men.
Jackie Pajamas.
Sorry, Jackie Pajamas. I do apologize. How could I ever forget?
I mean, the pajamas is the important part, I'll grant you.
But he actually fires a gun right in front of Bard's face. The old like sort of deafen him with a gunshot kind of tactic.
I actually really like that panel, with the way the light's flaring from the gun. It feels loud.
Yeah. As we actually find out later, it's actually more that he's blinding him with the gunshot because it's right in front of his face as opposed to the side of his head. But in the moment, I just kind of took it as the sound. But it does make sense looking at it now, knowing how it ends. It's like, yeah, that's right in his eyes.
Yeah.
But so Babs wakes up. But before we get to that, though, there's a moment where Dinah wakes up. But before we get to that, Babs is sitting on her own, and I love this detail here, where she's sitting feeling all sort of helpless because she can't help Dinah, and then the camera, you can feel the camera pull back. The actual sequence of the panels here is really good, where it pulls back and someone's watching her on a security camera, and then it pulls back even more, and there's like 6 screens. You know, it's a proper setup watching her. I mean, it's all just the same image.
Yeah, that feels weird. That almost feels a little bit lazy, right?
No, see, this is the thing. I don't think it. I mean, it's weird when you think about the logic of it. It's not weird in the context of the time period. Movies did this in security cameras all the time at this point. This is actually this is playing into the tropes. Hell, even Batman '89, there's a scene where you see like Joker's face on a bunch of screens at the same time, which wasn't security cameras. That was like all the different feeds of the TV studio. But this was a very common visual at the time for like action movies. Whenever there were security cameras involved, for some reason, and I don't know why, but I've seen this done a lot before. So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say this was more about leaning into the tropes of the time period than it was about being lazy.
Okay.
But and of course, just after we see this visual, the pen pal, you know, the whoever she's talking to online, just messages her, and basically kind of gets her talking about Dinah without saying names or anything. Just sort of, she's talking about her partner and how there's a trust thing and how you're both equally important, blah blah blah. And then leaves her alone. But it's very notable when he starts talking to her. It's like right as she's at her lowest, right as she's feeling helpless.
Given that this is only a 3-issue arc, I think it's safe to assume this is going to be the second arc, right?
Oh sure. I mean, at the very least, if not the second arc, then further down the line than that.
Right. But I think it's teasing it so heavily in each issue. Like, you know, this is a good 3 or 4 pages dedicated to it. I feel like it's probably sooner rather than later.
I could totally see the just the final of the next issue, like the last couple pages being the reveal of whoever this is. Like that, you know, we'll finish the story and then there'll be like a little epilogue of who's talking to Babs on the computer setting up issue 4. I mean, that's totally a possibility. But and we see that Dinah can't hear her. Her earpiece is with the rest of the rich people's junk. But Dinah wakes up and she's in like, you know, drab clothes. There's all these other people there. All these rich sort of like, you know, essentially princesses, for lack of a better word. Like all these like, you know, 20-something daughters of rich people. And we find out, you know, some of them have lost fingers, some of them have lost this, and they're just forced to work. So in Pajama's whole thing is that, hey, like kidnappers make money once and maybe then either give the person back or kill them. No. I'll keep the money coming in to keep them alive. I'll make it an ongoing thing, and then I'll use them as workers as well. It's, you know, he's really thought this through.
He's a savvy businessman, and he is intentionally targeting rich people to kidnap because they got rich families. They can keep paying for the rest of their lives. Yeah.
So it's proper dire. I do enjoy that Dinah makes a Bridge in the River Kwai reference because the whole like, you know, prisoner camp aspect is one of the first things I thought of, to be honest.
Especially with what they're wearing as well.
Yeah. So. And it's like, oh, you're going out to work. It's time to work. So, and this is where we see Hellhound here. So we get the full sort of like wraparound context of, oh, the people who were trying to run away last issue were people who were in this camp, and that's you know, that's why they were being chased. So at the end of the issue though is that she finds Jason, and the cliffhanger is that Jason's got a blindfold on, and blindfold's maybe not quite the right term, but because it's basically there because his eyes are too sensitive. They're, you know, he says he's blind. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's temporary because of the flash of light in his eyes, and he's going to be fine.
I agree. I have to say, with his hair like that and the blindfold, he looks very Daredevil-esque.
It does look very Daredevil, actually. It's one of the worst panels in the issue, unfortunately. I think his face looks a little bit sort of rigid and like it feels a little bit too flat.
Yeah. I think it's the way the turn doesn't look like it's got any depth to it.
Yeah, we spoke a lot in the last issue about Greg Land being the artist and how sometimes it feels like Greg Land it kind of earned the reputation he has now, and sometimes it's just sort of more typical 90s looking comics.
I think it's really frustrating because he clearly has solid sequential storytelling pacing down, like without a doubt.
The pacing's there, yeah, no, you're right. The panel to panel pacing's solid, if not great.
Just, when you look into the individual panels, that's where it loses some of that shine. There
was a moment earlier on actually when he first like breaks out Dinah from the you know, the interrogation room. There's a moment where he sort of glances over at her when I think it's when she says his name. That it's one of those things where I looked at the face and went, that looks kind of awkward and maybe traced, maybe not, but either way there's something kind of off about it.
I feel that every 2 or 3 pages.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because it does hold back some really strong sequential pacing.
Although The one big Greg Land thing I tried at one point was like when he did like Matt Fraction's Iron Man, I think it was, or maybe no, I think it was the series after Fraction's Iron Man, but it was an Iron Man. But I only read issue 1. But I
think it was Gillen's Iron Man because it's one of the few Gillen things I wasn't able to enjoy.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, maybe Gillen's. But on top of the awkward faces and stuff, the coloring in that book had this kind of ultra digital glossy look to it, which just made everything even worse.
Yeah, I'm willing to say that probably wasn't Land's choice.
Probably not, but it accented everything about it that made it bad.
That was actually a really frustrating book because you'd think, all right, do Iron Man, just stick him on something that just draws suits would be ideal almost for Land, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't work for whatever reason. It was particularly rough.
No, it did not. It did not work. But yeah, no, I mean the issue's fairly solid though. I enjoyed the stuff with Dinah and Bard playing into the, and I actually genuinely enjoyed even though I suspected that he was going to turn out to be a good guy, because I think we never even talked about why he's actually there. He's actually investigating. He's trying to look for one of the people who's been kidnapped. He's been hired by one of the families to rescue them. So. Yeah. Like I did enjoy the build up to him kind of revealing, no, I'm on your side. I'm not a bad guy.
It says a lot. I probably enjoyed Bard more in this one issue than I have in any of the recent Batgirl issues.
No, I concur. Well, I think it's more interesting in being something from our past that maybe there is issues actually exploring it. That wouldn't surprise me if there is, but I've not read them. But I think the actual building of the romance in the recent Batgirl issues is just really sort of forced and contrived. Whereas this here is kind of, it all just makes for fun because Dinah's just having a blast, kind of prodding him with information and asking Babs about it and all those elements. But then you actually get to what's going on, and it's actually quite dark and sinister, and it kind of feeds into the sort of like crimes and like bad guys that they're tackling in this book so far, and what they have been kind of consistently doing since the start. It's been a lot of very kind of political and like both like drugs and people smuggling, and it's all these kind of like heightened versions of like more real world kind of like very dark crimes. Actually, they're very kind of grounded in their nastiness, I suppose, as opposed to a super villain who's trying to take over the world kind of thing.
I think that goes back to most of those one shots as well. To be fair,
that's what I mean. That's since the start.
Okay, yeah. So I think I meant just this, since the start of technically this book, but no, if you can.
Yeah, no, since the very first issue, it's all been about going to these places where there's corrupt leaders and there's all these more kind of, like I say, just more grounded ideas. I mean, dark grounded ideas, but grounded all the same. So yeah, it plays really well into that. Art's a bit more hit and miss, I would say. But what are you rating Birds of Prey issue 2?
I'm going to give it a 7.5. I would love to be able to give it an 8 or maybe higher, but the art just holds it back from that, unfortunately. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this is the fourth book in a row I've given the same rating, but I think I agree with the 7.5. As in, I really enjoyed the story, but the art just stops it from going into great territory. That's not to say that the story could be even better and maybe like break that threshold on its own anyway, but as it is, really solid and enjoying the characters.